Hello and welcome to the Aviatrix book review and the Aviatrix book club, the last Sunday of the month, which is hosted by the Los Angeles 99s. I'm Liz Booker. I'm the host of the book club, but anyone can host a discussion whenever it's convenient for them. And the LA 99s have graciously been hosting this discussion consistently since the inception of the book club. So for the past 18 months, we've come together, and today we have our regulars and we have some new faces, which is really exciting. And we have two special guests. So before I hand this over to Jonna, who is our actual host today, I'd like to introduce and let them talk about their books that are related to the topic today, which is The Night Witches. First of all, Amy Goodpaster Strebe, my good and longtime friend. Would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. So nice to be here today. So my name is Amy Goodpaster Strebe, and I wrote a book, like several years ago, called "Flying for a Country," which is a comparative study of the of the WASP and the Soviet airwomen of World War II. It was actually my master's thesis in graduate school. And I enjoyed the research so much and really enjoyed the subject. So I decided to see if I could get it published after I graduated. And as luck would have it, I got it published, and came out in hardcover and then in paperback, which was really wonderful. It really kind of sustained its life that way. And I've just been really grateful to, over the years, been able to meet several of the WASP and become friends with them, as well as the Soviet airwomen. In fact, it's exciting to be here with the 99s, because I actually traveled with the 99s in December of 2007 to Moscow. And we were able to be with a lot of the Soviet airwomen there. I got to meet Nadia Popova, who was like, for me, was like a rock star. And that, as you know, Elizabeth, right? It's been really great. And I even though I'm not a pilot myself, I really enjoy aviation and just have so much just admiration for the women who flew during World War II. And I'm just very excited to be a part of this discussion and book club today. So thank you, Liz, for including me.
Thanks so much for being here. Amy and I met because her husband and I flew together when I was a junior pilot, and I knew nothing about aviation history, women in aviation history at all. And that was the first time I had heard of these women. And then Amy and I have continued to be friends. Amy is a well-established journalist and historian, and she's working on another degree right now, in museum studies, is that right?
Museum studies, yes, here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. And we have Elizabeth Wein. Tell us about you and this book in particular.
Well, first of all, can I just say that I'm very excited to meet Amy, because her book was actually one of the ones that I used in doing the research for my book, which my nonfiction book, A Thousand Sisters, which is obviously one of the ones that I guess we're discussing today. And how did I find out about the Night Witches? I honestly don't know. They've been in my awareness for a long time. And I think that the first book I actually read about them was a French comic book. And sorry, while I adjust my earbuds, was a French comic book, which I actually came across while we were in France in 2010. And there was a poster in flying club, in the microlight section of a flying club, a great big beautiful poster of this, very buxom, because it's comic strips written for men, person flying a PO2 at one of their little training aircraft that they used for night bombing. And that was probably like a comic book introduction for me to these women. But I honestly can't remember a recent time when I didn't have some consciousness of them. And I included one in my 2013 novel, Rose Under Fire, which is mostly set in the women's concentration camp at Ravensbrück. And this was just kind of a minor character. And I was asked actually to write this, this nonfiction book because there seemed to be kind of a greater awareness of not just the Night Witches, but the whole of the 3 regiments that the Night Witches were one of in the Soviet Union during World War II. And I was asked by an editor who had read somebody's obituary or heard a report about them on NPR as they were kind of dying off and also coming to the surface, being, sort of lauded laterally for the stuff they'd done. And she said, would you write a book? It was originally supposed to be a middle grade nonfiction book. So for ages 8 to 12, just about the Night Witches. And the more research I did, the more complicated it became. And I felt like I couldn't tell the story without telling the whole story of all 3 of Marina Roscova's regiments. So that's kind of how that book came into being. It's one of these things like where I just felt the whole time I was doing it, like I wasn't doing a good enough job. I'm mostly a fiction writer, and when it's done, I'm thinking, oh, I don't speak Russian. I haven't actually talked to any of these people. I think that Amy, you and I share Kim Green as a contact. And she was hugely helpful in putting me in touch with women who were members of the 99s in Russia when I was there. So anyway, I'm rambling, but that's kind of the long story of how I came to write that book.
And for anyone who doesn't know who Elizabeth Wein is, otherwise outside this book, she is a very accomplished writer. With many books that feature women during World War II in aviation through her fiction, most notably, of course, Codename Verity, which we'll be reading later this year and discussing in the Aviatrix book club. Can you?
Yeah, that's me. I forgot to say hi. I'm the author of Codename Verity. But yeah, that's me.
we all know that, but maybe some people listening might not. So as was mentioned, for the book club this month, we are discussing 2 books, which is the first time that we've ever done that. So the first that we just talked about is 1,000 Sisters, which is the young adult nonfiction, and then The Huntress by Kate Quinn. And I have completed my interview with Kate and just watched it after its edits today, and it's fabulous. She's a really experienced, obviously, writer and someone who is very skilled at giving interviews. So I think you guys are all going to enjoy that. But with that, I'm going to hand the book club controls over to our host, LA 99's Jonna Lynn.
Hi, everybody. So I'll start with my introduction first. I'm a student pilot out of Santa Monica. I've been a member of the 99s for about a year. Which is about the time that I've been doing the book club as well. I generally host, so I come up with all the questions that you're going to hear today. So I'll just start off with some introductions. I'll just kind of go in order of people that have appeared on my screen. So I'll start with Jennifer. If you could just introduce yourself.
Okay. I am a fan of Elizabeth for a long time. And I'm in the Air Force Reserve. I just joined Civil Air Patrol here in Norman, Oklahoma. I just got my private pilot's license last year, and I'm working on my commercial right now. So, planes.
Excellent. And then Becky, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Becky Condon here. I'm retired for 1.5 years now, just about. I was a naval aviator, one of the early ones, and only my hairdresser knows for sure. And then a Delta pilot for 34.5 years. So fully retired now, and I love books, and I'm a book club addict, and I like to write. I'm working on my 3rd novel.
Excellent. Thank you, Becky. And then Erin, you can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm currently based in London, although I am also chair of the LA 99s, sort of been long distance during the pandemic. I have PPL, fly for the fun of it, and I'm a film composer as my real life. So that's me.
Thank you, Erin. And Lola.
Hi, everybody. Obviously, I'm Lola Reed Allen. I started flying in the late 70s. I flew for the Ontario government, flying Twin Otters and Dash 8s. I have a Class 1 instructor rating. I'm a member of the Aviatrix Book Club and the Aviatrix Writers. And I'm also a 99, and I'm part of our Canadian Eastern Ontario Education and Outreach Committee, as well as I'm the speaker and speaker coordinator for the Northern Lights Aero Foundation in Toronto. And I'm writing a book about my career in aviation, and I hope to get it published really soon. And it's nice to see everybody.
Thanks, Lola. And Angie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Angie Griffin. I am a rotor, commercial rotor CFI, drone 107, airplane single in landing pilot. I love aviation. I'm an instructor at Texas A&M, Central Texas in aviation science. And I love Elizabeth's books. Thank you so much for that. My dissertation is going to be on high performing female pilots. So God, I love every minute of both of them, but Codename Verde was one of the first books that I found that I read about aviation, and man, it's fantastic. So thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Leah.
Hello, my name is Leah. I'm a charter pilot currently in the G4, Denver based, but out in Florida right now where it's nice and hot. And I know some of us live in Florida, so enjoying that. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Leah. Perfect. And Micah.
Hi, Mike Lustenauer. I've been a member of the book club, I think, from the beginning. I'm a lawyer for airlines in the Netherlands, and I have my private pilot license. At the moment, I'm at the airport, so maybe you'll see some takeoffs behind me.
Cool. Thank you, Micah. And Susie.
Hi, I'm Susie Morgan. I'm a captain with British Airways on the 777. And I'm also, like Micah, started at the beginning of this aviation book club. So love reading.
Thank you. And is it Eva or Ava?
Ava.
Thank you.
I am not a pilot, but I love airplanes and I love Elizabeth's books. And my next book is going to have a 12-year-old girl crushing on Charles Lindbergh in 1927. So I like airplanes.
Before we move on, Ava, you mentioned your next book. Can you give us just a quick intro to your work?
Oh, yeah, I write historical fiction. My first one was set in World War I, and my most recent one was 1952 Argentina. So none of them include airplanes except for the one that's coming out, I guess, 2 books from now. But it's the next one I'm going to be working on.
Oh, that's so great. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. And then Christy.
Hello. I'm a student pilot, and Codename Verde is one of my most favorite books on the planet, so this is really exciting.
And then Yolanda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yolanda, and I'm a student pilot. I've been volunteering with the 99s for maybe 3 or 4 years, but officially a member for about 2 years now, 2 or 3 years. So that's how I heard about this club, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I really like the meetings and the books. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. If you don't mind, I will just go ahead and get started with the questions. It was nice meeting some new faces. Usually, I like to start the club off just by asking what everybody's initial thoughts are. Just kind of whatever you want to say about the book right off the bat. Let's start with that.
I'd heard of the Night Witches for a long time, but I thought it was like a few, like a specialty thing, like a fluke or something, or maybe women that pretended they were men. I had no idea it was so huge. I loved Elizabeth's explanation of all of it, the historical facts of it, and I particularly liked that in front of the Huntress because I understood more about the main character, Nina.
Yeah, and I wanna add to that like obviously I haven't read both books. I wrote one of them. And so I came with a whole lot of preconceptions to The Huntress, and I was really, really impressed with not just the research that Kate Quinn had done, but also the way she presented it. Like it, you know, it didn't feel like there was never an info dump going on. It felt very natural. The character felt very natural, and you were in her head in a way that I really struggled with as I was starting to put together that book. I mean, if you've read it, you'll know I spent a lot of time kind of like trying to go through the whole setup of Stalinist Russia. And I was really impressed that she just managed to kind of effortlessly pull that all together in a fictional telling.
It was so interesting. I just thought the whole topic of the Night Witches was fascinating. And we all think we're la-di-da, you know, because we've been airline pilots now and stuff like that. It's like, geez, are we behind it? I had no idea. None.
Oh my God, how did they do it?
Yeah, I was like Becky in that I also thought it was just this small band of women that sort of got together and did it. I had no idea it was on the scale that it was. So for me, that was totally inspiring.
I read books in reverse from what Becky did. I read The Huntress first, then I read Elizabeth's book, and I loved The Huntress. And you're gonna be shocked, Liz. I loved that book. It was a page turner. It was great. I recommended it to a friend. It was so good, and actually, kind of, I think I liked the way I read it in the order I read it, because then when I read Elizabeth's book, it just kind of put together what I had read, and then more in detail, reading Elizabeth's book, got to know more about the Night Witches or the women, and it was wonderful. And I was a little worried I wasn't going to finish both books in time, but I powered through and read them both. But they were great selections. This might be one of my favorites that we've read so far.
Oh, see, and so Leah, for those who don't know, Leah is our harshest critic usually, and has no qualms whether the author is on or not about telling you what she thought of the book. So this is a special day for everybody.
I read the book about a year ago, and for a different book club, and I've recommended it for this one, and I just loved it the first time, and I reread it this time, and it was just lovely to have it also with your book, Elizabeth, as well, to just expand on the detail. I think it's such a fascinating story, and how it was told. It was a big book, wasn't it? And it's the pace of it, and it just accelerated the way they did the timeline. I thought it was incredibly clever. And how on earth, as I always say, you write a book like that, you know, and how many post-it notes have you got on your wall to try and work out who's meant to be doing what? But I loved it. Brilliant.
Even though you quite in the beginning already knew that the stepmother would be the Jagerin or the huntress, it still was really, the tension was really well built up, and it stayed so until the end. That was really impressively done.
I thought that was an interesting plot decision to make, though. Like, we're going to make it really, really obvious to the reader right from the start who the killer is, and like, you know, what the stakes are. And I kept wondering the whole way through, okay, well, how's this going to come together? Because, like, you knew they were going to have to find her at some point, and you knew who was going to have to be found, and what they were going to be up against. But it's an interesting plot decision. Liz, I actually found reading this book that in some ways it felt very YA to me, apart from the fact that it has, it's mostly adults, and it's twice as long as a YA novel, and there's some sex in it. Apart from that, like the pace and the way the characters interacted, and the way you felt towards the characters, the way you were kind of made to really, really invest yourself in them and in their personality, just it felt like YA novel to me. And I kind of envied her, because Kate Quinn, because I felt like a lot of the stuff, like telling you in the beginning who the killer is, she wouldn't have got away with if she hadn't been writing for adults. That there's more freedom in putting together this book.
Well, so I think I'm with you on that in so many ways. I think probably what gives you that feeling, or what gave me that feeling, was because we got so much of Nina's backstory, and we started in her childhood and got to see
Jordan
how she
as well. I mean, Jordan starts out as a teenager as well.
That's right. Yeah. And then of course these women are so young. I mean, the women who are flying for the night, which it could be, you know, like your books are YA. And I just want to mention to you that Kate Quinn totally gushed about you and your work. So you're both like fangirls.
Yeah, we've been in touch from time to time.
Okay,
no, she's
good.
lovely. She's really lovely.
Amy, did you have a chance to read The Huntress? Because I would love to hear what your thoughts were after all of your research.
I did, yes. I thought it was really good, especially towards the end. I mean, it kind of took me a little bit kind of to get into it, and then towards the middle and the end, I was just like, and just like Elizabeth said, it just kind of started. I'm like, okay, well, is it just obvious to me that like I think I know who did this? But I think not to say presumptuously what everybody thought, but for me, I kind of like wanted to see the showdown between the Huntress and Nina, because I knew there was going to be something between them. They were kind of like, building up, but there's going to be this big like confrontation at the end, and you kind of wanted to see like, okay, what is this going to look like? Who's going to be left standing? So no, I thought it was really well paced. I mean, I initially, because I did the audiobook actually, and when it says like 50 some chapters, I was just like, oh my God. It's like I really underestimated like how big this is. But no, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was especially towards the end, I just was really like, okay, I don't know what happened, and I thought the characters were really good, and how it was developed and everything. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
How did the audiobook work? Did they have different voices reading the different characters?
I think it was the same. It was the same reader, right?
I did both. I like listened and read. So and there were times when I listened and read at the same time, because the narrator was so good, but she did all of the accents.
Yeah, which is tough. I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
That just
she was able to switch between all of them, and she did a really good job, and it made it more entertaining.
Definitely.
I really enjoyed the audio too. So Liz, you read it and listened to some parts of it. Now, what was your decision to do that? At what point did you decide to do that, and why?
I was traveling, and I knew this was a big book and I needed to get started. So I started by listening, but then it was so good. And what was interesting, just for the writers in here, was that I found myself, interestingly, being able to take note of craft elements in a different way by listening to it than I do when I read. And that was sort of like an epiphany for me. I was like, I don't know if I would have caught this if I was reading it on the page, but I'm able to really absorb it in listening. So that was just different.
What sort of stuff, Liz, out of interest?
Some of the ways in which she described just very, very small, granular things like word choice in repetitions in the story, which she uses very well, imagery, and then also sort of bigger picture stuff about where she left us hanging at the end of a chapter, this non-linear storytelling going back and forth. I just was able to kind of pay attention to those elements in a different way by listening.
Cool, thank you.
So it's interesting when Jake said the non-linear, which had the two stories kind of, you go back and forth almost. When I've read some other books, sometimes it's hard to keep, not track, but it doesn't flow as well. And I thought with this book, it wasn't hard for me to understand or to read this and then go to a different part, that it still flowed well. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just thought, she did such a great job. Just the way that she wrote it, that in the past when I read books, I kind of had to remember, wait, who am I reading? What happened with them? Okay, wait, now who am I reading this chapter and what happened? So I did notice that it was just easy to read that way. I didn't have to really think too much back and forth what chapter the character was about.
I just wanted to go back to the discussion about knowing that she was the huntress ahead of time. For me, that added to the suspense, because it was like the enemy was living there in plain sight, and there was a danger element to it, and there was a lot of information to discover and learn, but all the while, this dangerous person is living there with this lovely family. And I mean, I suspected straight away that when the father died, that it wasn't an accident, and things like that. But to me, that just added to the tension, because how was it all going to play out, basically?
I confess that when I first read the description of her, I thought they were kind of setting me up to discover that this person, that there was some twist on what she'd actually done, that she wasn't going to turn out to be the evil person that they thought she was. So I was waiting for a different twist. And it took me a while to get into the feeling of, yeah, she's actually as evil as they're painting her. But I mean, that's just a different reading of it, I guess.
Maybe that's because of the first pages where where there is a prologue, and she hints to that she's being accused of bad things, but she hadn't done.
I can't remember that. It was so long. Oh. It was so many pages ago. I did struggle with the length of it, I confess.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. I'll have to go back and reread that.
So I think we were discussing with friends earlier that the victor writes history, that everything is portrayed in the vision, how the victor sees it, and that she the losing party is portrayed badly, while she, according to her, wasn't.
I was wondering, Elizabeth, after reading The Huntress, and you already had your book published, do you feel if you had read The Huntress first before you did your book, would that have changed at all?
Absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely not. I think my book was published. They were both published in the same year, I think. So we were kind of working on them concurrently. But I found that reading the Nina sections that where you're going, I mean, her childhood was all like, oh, wow, that's, wildly imaginative, and what a great idea to have her grow up in Siberia with this wacko for a father, learn to support herself in the wilderness and all that. That was all different. But when she came to the actual training with the 122nd Air Group, and then moved on to the 588th, like a lot of that was just so straightforward as far as what we believe, what we know to have really happened, that I could almost predict, kind of like who was going to die next and how they were going to die and what she was going to have to do when she had to climb out on the wing to manually let go of the bombs and this kind of stuff. So it was textbook, if you want to put it that way. And it was great because you're in her head and you're seeing it from her point of view, and it's fictionalized. But I didn't really feel that there was anything different from the stories that these women told. And Amy will probably be able to tell you better than I can how faithfully the women who were part of Marina Ruskova's regiments chronicled their own experiences, how they wrote memoirs, they did interviews, they really told their own stories very, very eloquently. And, we've all read all the same books, like Amy and me and Kate Quinn have all read all the same books. I have not, unfortunately, talked to any of these people. So, that's something that I'm quite envious of you for having done. But I don't think it would have changed what I wrote.
I really like the way that you went in and talked about their personal lives, and you got to know a little bit about the background of the women that you wrote about. And I think Nina, she was kind of she was quiet about it. She wouldn't talk about it very much. But I mean, you got the background from the author, but yeah, I kind of liked it I like the fact that I was able to see a little bit broader spectrum of individuals. So that was good.
I like the way that Nina was, although she was really, really good at flying, she didn't make pilot, she was navigator. And I found that listening as she was sort of the heroine of the story, really, to a certain extent, it was quite nice that she wasn't automatically the pilot. That would have been too obvious. So I thought that was really good. And it was fascinating, the detail they said, and in your book as well, Elizabeth, about how they, anyone could fly. If you joined the party, you were allowed to fly. And that was amazing. They were very, very forward thinking in those days.
Yeah.
They really
in
were.
some ways, yes. And it's so hard for us to really take on board at this point.
But the piece at the end of Elizabeth's book where they describe that they were sent home, the regiments were disbanded, and they were instructed, don't talk about this anymore. I thought, okay, I've heard that. I get that. I feel that. But later we all got curious and found out about them. I mean, I came real late to that. I had no idea. I'm still just amazed.
That kind of drives me nuts, because one of the things that I noticed was that people in the US during the war did know about them. And there was this kind of like red craze during the war where everybody was listening to Shostakovich and getting excited about the ballet and stuff because these were our allies. And but the fact that they named a US ship after Marina Raskova 6 months after she was killed, and the reporting that was done in some pretty major newspapers and magazines talking about these people. And we're just like, whoosh, it's gone. It still continues to surprise people.
Well, the WASP pilots were all but buried. After the war was over. It took them so long to get recognition and even any kind of real gratitude for what they were able to accomplish.
I loved that you included the bit about William Faulkner in Battle Cry at the opening of this book. And I feel like I've read that somewhere else too, maybe in Our Journeys or something, but I loved it. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
So that was, if you've read it somewhere else, it might have been, what actually put me onto it was a kind of throwaway bit in M.T. Anderson's Symphony for the City of the Dead, which is about the writing of Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony, which is the Leningrad Symphony. And that was where I found out about this Battle Cry, this screenplay that Faulkner was working on. But actually we were struggling, my editor and I were struggling with a way to drag, because this book is aimed at young readers. It's really meant for a high school audience. And we were struggling for a way to draw them into it in a way they would relate to. And I had bought somewhere, I'd found a copy of the screenplay for this movie that was never made. It was like, and I actually only found it by accident because I was tidying up the house for Christmas, and I had in-laws coming to visit or something. And I was like, oh yeah, I bought this like 3 years ago when I first started working on this book. I'm going to take a look at it. And I started reading it and I was like, this is so amazing. This is Faulkner. This is like, Nobel Prize winning, iconic American author who was working on this. And as I read the screenplay, I realized that I knew some of the music that they had used in it because my father used to sing it. And then, of course, it also focuses on the Leningrad Symphony. And it's like, this was massive. And I thought, well, okay, this was going on in Hollywood. This is something that we can all relate to nowadays, right? The making of a movie. And the more I learned about it, the more I thought this is the way into the story. So that's why I did that. And I went on a writing retreat and I spent a week writing that introduction. And it was like the breakthrough of the whole book, taking that way into it. And every time I thought of him, and how disappointed he must have been that that movie never got made, because he thought of it as his war work. I would think, okay, I owe him that, you know, if that movie had been made, we'd all know about these people. So I wouldn't be writing this book. So now this is what I have to do now. And it just, I don't know, I felt a real, not a connection to him, but having that bit of an in really made it, to me, feel much more relatable and understandable. But it was M.T. Anderson who put me onto that.
You guys had some uncles that were in World War II, and they never talked about anything. And so to me, when I hear everybody talking about what we don't know and those kinds of things, it's like nobody talked. Like nobody. It wasn't just Russia telling the women to not talk about this when they left. As far as my understanding or family and what I know about that war is, you know, my uncle had medals and never talked about any of them. And we only saw him. The only time we saw him was at his funeral when somebody put him together on a, you know, a little, you know, little poster thing. And so it's not odd to me in some ways that we haven't heard about a lot of these things. It is odd to me that I didn't find out about the Night Witches until the last couple of years, you know, at least knowing a little bit more about them. But at the same time, it seems like an overall theme at the time or something.
Well, no, I think you're right. A lot of people, some of them didn't want to talk about it. Some of them were sworn to secrecy. Some of them just really did want to move on.
And as Kate points out, though, you know, she goes, at her words, digging in the cracks of history to find stories about what the women were doing, because the stories that have been told have mostly been told by men, either who experienced it or who have researched it. So, yeah.
Yeah, my grandmothers both lived here in occupied Netherlands, but they really don't want to talk about it. Nobody does.
I'm sure that made it a lot harder to get all your information, Elizabeth. I did want to say that I was honestly shocked at kind of the connection that I got to the women in your book, just because it was kind of just a, you know, kind of factual in the beginning. I was actually shocked at kind of the emotional connection I felt when a lot of the characters did end up like passing away in those moments. I was wondering if anybody else kind of felt that same way, or if you kind of felt yourself forming connections in her book that you were shocked by.
I can tell you one thing that I myself felt at the time that I was writing it, which was that it was such a relief to be writing nonfiction, because like much as I was connecting to the characters that I knew were gonna die, when they died, it wasn't gonna be my fault. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't gonna have people coming back to me and saying, I hate you forever. You killed off my favorite character. It was not anything I had any control over. But I mean, there were a couple of them for sure that writing, it was just like, oh God, this is just, how can this be?
There was a kind of a point in the book where it was kind of like one after the other, like person kind of passing away. I was like, oh my God, how did these women, you know, just connecting with it on like this actually happened kind of level. It was shocking to me that, you know, on 2 hours of sleep every single night, their friends are passing away left and right, they're getting shot at, and they just wake up and continue to do that. I really liked how you included kind of, it was like little bits of information I felt that kind of connected the characters, you know, like their relationships with each other or things like that. It even though they, you know, were real people, I felt like connected to them like they were like characters when they were dying like that.
Again, that is partly because of the age group that it's aimed at. And I feel like my editors put a lot of effort into making sure that you could connect to the characters, and they would kind of like smack me on the wrist when I talked too much about women's rights or sort of what was going on with Stalin's cronies or whatever. That's not what they want to hear about. They want to hear about how their hair froze to the pillows when they got wet, and this kind of stuff.
But those pieces you did put in about Stalin and the culture and what life was like there, I found completely riveting. And that equality bit, that he wanted all equal, and I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. How that can be used, in a way that kind of,
well, he was pretty
reacting.
bonkers. He was a pretty crazy dude, and I think that a lot of the way that equality was set up in the young Soviet Union is really down to Lenin and his buds and his wife. But they followed through with it. So,
I thought that was interesting primer on that period of cultural history. I
felt that I couldn't write it without getting into their mindset. It was actually stopping me from writing anything. It's like, why were they so excited about going to war? These 17, 18-year-olds. Why did they rush out to the recruitment centers and volunteer? I know, but it was just like
the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II, World War I, I guess.
But they were women. They were really 18-year-old girls.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But they were coached to be equal. They were completely equal. They didn't have a woman's place. They had a country place.
Yeah.
And they found it fight too.
They found it really hard to understand when they were told, no, sorry, we can't sign you up. They're just like, what? This isn't what you told us.
That was very interesting cultural study there, I thought. Just fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it's amazing that Russia, it was the first country to have women pilots. Right? Like that blows my mind to think. I mean, thinking about what I know, and if I was going to guess which country put women first in aviation and flying, I would pick Russia. So that I kept thinking about that. I was reading the books it was amazing to me. And like you said, how they trying to be equal, and yet look where we are in the States, and
well, they're worse in Russia now. Like, they've gone backwards.
Yeah, I was going to say, I talked about this. When I talked with Amy about this, I asked her, like, what does it look like today in the military there? Do women still have an equal role? And what did I can't remember exactly what you said, but no.
No, I mean, this was like several years ago. I mean, God knows what it looks like right now within Russia. But yeah, I mean, one thing I wanted to mention too, that I found very interesting after writing my book and just speaking to a lot of the Soviet airwomen themselves, is that, in this country, in the United States, we have, it was such a big deal for women to get back into the cockpit, especially military planes, because it was off limits, after the WASP. I mean, talk about the night witches and the Soviet airwomen being forgotten, but the WASP are forgotten too. I mean, they actually did not want anybody to remember them. For the Soviet Union, I think too, I mean, the reason why they had women flying planes was because they had a shortage of pilots. I mean, they needed, just like with the WASP, actually, the American men were off in war fighting combat, so they needed women to deliver planes and all the things that the men would normally be doing, but they were occupied overseas. But what's interesting to me, I remember talking to one of the Soviet airwomen, and it was like, we think of like having this great opportunity as women, to fight in combat, to have this opportunity to be a fighter pilot, to just as men do. But the women that I spoke to, or the woman I spoke to, I remember she said that, after the war, we were just glad we were done with it. We had done our duty. And it's not, I remember she was saying, like, I don't understand, like, why American or Western women, like, want to become fighter pilots. Like, why do you want to do that again? Like, we did it because, we had to save the motherland, and this was our duty. Also to obviously avenge a lot of their friends and their comrades. But it was a very different mindset as to Americans. Like, we want this opportunity. We deserve to have this opportunity, where the Russians were like, yeah, I don't see it. Like, we've been through all the war and the carnage of war, and we're like, we're obviously they're very proud of their achievements, but it wasn't something that they really wanted to do again. And that was that generation too. I'm sure, like, the younger, Russian pilots, I don't think there are Russian female pilots, like fighter pilots right now, but I'm sure there is a generation that do want to, like, maybe fight for their country, or be able to have those opportunities. But it was just very interesting. I found, like, just between the WASP, or just the American perspective, and then the Soviet perspective, this was very different.
I would add to that I haven't spoken face to face with any of the Soviet women pilots, but I have spoken to some of the women who flew for the British Air Transport Auxiliary, and they said exactly the same thing. So I went to a panel where they were speaking. This is about 10 years ago now. And somebody in the audience said, well, wouldn't you have wanted to be fighter pilots? And they said, no, we were doing our duty. We were needed to do these deliveries, and that's what we did. It never occurred to us that we could be fighter pilots. We were doing, what we could do.
Right.
And we were proud of it.
What they did was very dangerous too. WASP lost their lives too.
Yeah.
We forget that the women who flew just, from coast to coast and delivering aircraft, they died as well. So it wasn't just the pilots who were in combat who passed away and had dangerous jobs.
Yeah. And my I don't want to say favorite example, but a shocking example of that was the Air Transport Auxiliary pilot who landed on a muddy airfield, and the plane flipped. And before they could get to the pilot, I don't think it was a woman, I think it was a man. He had drowned in the, water-soaked runway, had just seeped into the cockpit, and they couldn't get him out. So they were, running risks. It was wartime, and it was dangerous.
Yeah, circling kind of back to the gender roles. I did like how you touched on it a few times, but it kind of like wasn't the main kind of point of the book in like ways that men and women were relating to each other at the time. Like you mentioned it, but overall it was kind of just the story of the women and not their relation to men, if that makes sense. But I did have questions how everybody felt kind of about how gender was discussed in the book. I wrote down a few examples, such as you did put two kind of examples of how like there was like sexual assault against two, but other than that, it wasn't really documented. Does everybody think that was just kind of the way of like the time where you kind of just not spoken about issue, or because Russia at the time was more gender equal, do we think that it occurred less than it may have in the United States?
Amy, that would be a really interesting question, which you might actually be able to answer. But for example, the sabotage issue, and the just kind of denigrating attitude that the WASP got from men in the US.
There was definitely a lot of discrimination towards the women. There were a lot of, because Jacqueline Cochran, the director of the WASP, wanted to keep the program such a secret, because it was unprecedented in the United States. It never happened before. So there was fear that, if something went wrong, that then the program would be automatically disbanded. So there were women who were on air bases in the United States with men who were like, who are you? What do you mean? I'm not gonna go up with a woman in the cockpit. Like, what is this? And there were some women who wanted to get transferred out of the bases because there was so much, prejudice. And I think that, and I'm sure with the Soviet women, it was the exact same thing. I mean, there was a lot of shame, I think, too, in the Soviet Union, because there was the thought that like, oh my God, are you that bad off that you're sending like women or girls to die in combat because you don't have enough men? So I think there was a kind of the machismo kind of Russian, where like it wasn't really a proud thing that they did. I mean, obviously the women proved themselves amazingly enough and they could do this. And but I think there was, it's still a very, very paternal, a very, society in Russia. And so I think they both were very, in terms of gender, in terms of discrimination, they both had that. In terms of the sabotage, which Liz talks about too, and Elizabeth, I think, is like, there was this thing in North Carolina where they had, there was suspicions of sugar in the fuel tanks. And it was awful, and there was enough like evidence to be able to take this to the superiors and find out what's going on. And Jacqueline Cochran just pretty much shut everything, no, WASP, none of the pilots were allowed to talk about it. There was nothing, and because Jacqueline was so afraid that like, okay, this is excuse that the male hierarchy is basically looking forward to shut us down. And I think that was very difficult for a lot of the women pilots. I mean, I would imagine if I was stationed there and there was fear that, that I could be killed and just because of something like that, that's been incredibly difficult. But yeah, I think there was, in terms of discrimination, in terms of, I'm sure there was probably like sexual assault. There were probably things that happened. But I also think too, the generation that they were too, they wouldn't necessarily, probably talk about that. I don't know, just because they think nothing would have been done about it. But I would think also being the WASP and the Soviet Air women, because they were doing what they were doing for the first time, I think they were so just, really just wanting to do like the very best that they could and not let anything or anybody kind of stand in their way. So I'm sure they went through a lot of abuse and, a lot of things that, probably you and I today would be like, there's no way we would put up with that. But, it was a different time. And I think that the women understood that this is an opportunity that they wanted to continue. And, they probably had to put up with a lot of stuff that was probably pretty awful, I would imagine.
And
yeah,
sure. And it was wartime as well. So, a lot of stuff was happening, and people were more focused on winning the war than on the the other side of it. Maybe if those kind of things happened during peacetime, there would have been a different reaction. But what was important was to win the war, and so maybe people experiencing bad things just sort of put that behind me, move forward. We've got to focus on the goal.
Well, it's also interesting in the dive bomber regiment, the women that were flying the PE-2s in the Soviet Union, they were actually working in mixed flight crews. The whole regiment was working with mixed flight crews because the guns in the tail gunner basically women didn't have enough upper body strength to actually fire the guns for the most part. So they had almost all male gunners, and they seem to have gotten along just fine. They seem to have worked very, very well as mixed flight crews. And with the fighter regiment, the 586, they had 3 squadrons by the end of the war, and their 3rd squadron was a male squadron, and they also seemed to get along just fine. I mean, there were issues certainly that came up, but for the most part, I think they were just like really super focused on beating the fascists, and saving the motherland.
I think I was kind of shocked by it. I know when we've read about kind of the WASPs in the past, a lot of their negative experiences kind of with men, maybe they're just highlighted more than they would have been kind of in the books that we read. But in your book, Elizabeth, where they dropped that teddy bear that said like, we'll take care of you girls. Like, I haven't heard of anything at all happening like that, to the WASPs or, to the, other pilots. So I thought that was interesting.
I think to a certain extent, that may be the difference between fighting a war on your home territory where your country is actually under fire and you're being attacked, and trying to prepare things for war, which is going to be somewhere else. So that I think, and I don't have any evidence for this. There's evidence for it, but I haven't done a study into this. But I think there's likely to be more of a feeling of we're all in this together. We are working together. We're fighting the enemy. And to a certain extent, I think you're seeing it now, with men and women fighting together in Ukraine, just as volunteers.
Sure.
I'm sure there are atrocities going on there too, but it's like when there comes a point where you have to sort of drop the like petty administrative stuff because you actually have to get your work done.
Makes sense. Well, thanks for answering my question.
Oh, I don't feel like I did, but
you did. Thank you. So I'm kind of gonna shift gears a little bit and kind of move back to talking about both books. In both books or either book, did anybody have any feelings, questions, or things that they felt like they wished were included, or anything else that they wanted to kind of add to the book, or pieces that they felt like were missing?
I thought that the huntress herself was presented in a way that came off very flat, which surprised me, because all of the characters in that book I thought were very complex, but we only got the evil Nazi with the huntress. And if I missed it, then please correct me, but we understood the way Nina behaved because we got a glimpse into her backstory, and we got to see the way that she grew up and how, the reason that she was such a hard person. But she wasn't just hard, that she had a softer side. The huntress, and Becky and I talked about this because we did a discussion a couple of nights ago. The huntress was just pure evil, and anything kind that she did was to advance herself and her own interests. Did anyone else feel that way?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. To a certain extent, I remember when she was trying to justify her actions and she says, I've suffered too. I was like, you really can't be as intelligent as you are and think that anybody's going to buy, you saying, oh, I can't remember what she said her issues were, but she didn't have enough cream or something. It's just like these really pretty pathetic deprivations compared to not just the horror that was inflicted on some people, but also just what most ordinary people would have been suffering at the time. And it's like, do you really think that was suffering? So I felt like that did fall a little flat, but we didn't see inside her head. That we saw inside everybody else's head, and that may have put her at a big disadvantage.
Yeah, I just felt like she was a caricature of the monster Nazi more than anything.
I think for me, my big issue was I don't understand why she shot the people. I sorry, it's not that. I don't understand why she fed them first. That's the bit I just didn't get that. There was no motivation given for that. And
I totally got that. That was the Titanic moment where the woman puts her children to sleep in the bed and they, so that like they're calm in their cabin, and then the ship goes down, but they're not scared because they've been put to bed nicely by their mother. I think that was the idea behind it, but I didn't find it convincing.
Comes from love. That's from love.
That's right.
Your children are going to die, and so what's the most loving way for that to happen? But this was complete strangers, taking Seb in and then giving
weird.
him that.
No, that was weird.
And then smoking the cigarette and then just shooting him. To me, I didn't get that.
I think
I agree. I agree and I disagree. I thought she was a really complex character who wasn't completely developed. I mean, I agreed with Elizabeth just now when you said the compassion of knowing your children are going to die anyhow. And that's what she says about these 7 little kids that she fed and then shot. I mean, it's very cruel for sure. I just thought maybe the book was a lot longer and whoever made the decision to cut out the huntress, cut out the parts that would have let us inside her mind. Or maybe there's another book coming.
Well, do you think that maybe was her intention in writing the book, to keep the huntress? I didn't feel like it was flat. I didn't have that, but I'm obviously not a writer. I know, Liz, you have more insight that way. I didn't feel her character was flat, but I'm wondering maybe she developed. Yeah, I mean, but maybe that was on purpose. I don't know. I mean, maybe that was what she wanted to do in writing the book. And I think, Erin, you saying how she fed people and then killed them. Well, maybe that was part to show how evil she was, right? To do that. Like, that's even worse than just shooting someone, right? You feed them first and then kill them. So maybe that was just maybe part of that character development in that way, to show that she was evil, or more than, quote, normal evil. I don't know,
I think you're right, Leah. I think that, if you look at the back matter and she talks about what sparked her inspiration for this book, it started with the Nazi hunters. And so I did feel like it was intentional to create an utter monster who really had no redeeming qualities. Yeah.
But didn't that happen at the time as well? There was so much group think going on that was so evil. I mean, they were moving as a group in an evil direction. But I disagree with the fact that she's not complex because of her feelings for Jordan. It seemed like to me there was no self-interest in her being a little easier on Jordan than she had been on other people. There was none. Her dad was dead. You know what I'm saying? She let her go. She could have killed her in the basement. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's a big, yeah.
It helped her pick out a wedding dress, right? Things like that she obviously didn't have to do, or what. I think we could analyze this forever, but maybe in that part of the book, maybe she was trying to, I know she killed the dad, but trying to maybe turn over a little bit of a leaf, like a tiny bit, and like trying to be nice to Jordan. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, actually, something I really wondered about was what was her ulterior motive with Jordan all along? Because I couldn't quite figure out her motivation for killing the dad, except that it then made her inherit everything. But the idea was it was supposed to be Jordan's down the line, and I couldn't quite figure out why she would have killed him while stringing the girl along.
But wasn't he about to figure out who she was? Wasn't he beginning to question?
Yeah. Because Jordan knew, right? Like Jordan was kind of starting to piece stuff together, figure out. So I think it was a way to get the dad out of the picture, right? So then that makes that easier. He's gone. Just like how she killed the Seb and stuff, fed him and killed him. I mean, what was Seb gonna do? Was he really, in that environment, what was he really going to do? But I think because she was so evil, like you said, like the Nazi hunters or what, that she was just killing people as she went.
Jordan was suspicious of her from the very beginning, that very first day when she took her picture and went, oh, that's a weird, just from the.
I would have thought she would have just really wanted to take Jordan out right from the start.
Me too. But I think she needed to earn the trust of the dad, or husband, whatever, not the dad, but she had to earn the trust of him, or the illusion of the trust of him, or make him feel, so she could get in there and get what she wanted. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, and she was busy using that antique shop as sort of a front for her
that's right,
Nazi hiding caper. So as her husband kind of got wise to that, or got clues of that, I think that was what put him in peril. And Jordan got put down when she said, Dad, there's something wrong here. And she got put down. I think the huntress thought that maybe she was contained for at least some time.
I think this book would make a good movie. What do you guys
think.
Wouldn't it though?
Absolutely.
Don't you think? Because it had like the good suspense and the characters. There's a very colorful characters, right? Like what Tony, what his name? Tony and I forget the other guy's name now.
Yeah.
It's been a while since. Yeah, like
I think it would be an awesome movie. I agree.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
it's actually a bit big for a movie.
It's too big for a movie.
A lot.
Yeah, so really successful movies usually have quite from short stories quite often. It makes a successful movie. It's just it's so
it would make a better limited series.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Lots of suspense. Yeah, I think Brokeback Mountain. That was just a novella.
Yeah. The problem when you take a big book and try and, like Captain Corelli's Mandolin, they completely messed that up because it was such a big book.
It was.
To put it into 90 minutes or 120 minutes is very
right.
different.
I love that book, but the movie I did not like. You're right.
Likewise. Yeah.
I just got done with my second run of Game of Thrones. And so I was thinking about this when I was listening and reading this book about how great it would be to just have like an episode following one character and then come back to the story. I would love to see it like that.
Yeah.
So 50 episodes then.
5 seasons.
Perfect.
Even though you know at the beginning what's going to happen, you're still going to watch all 5 seasons.
Oh yes, I totally would.
Right? Yeah.
But it's like what's that film now? Zero Dark 30. We all know what happened at the end of it, but it's still really tense the whole way through.
Yeah.
So you know,
that's true. Has anyone read any other of her books? I'm just curious.
Yes. Fabulous.
Are they okay?
Actually, I lied. I'm listening to her other books. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right now I'm listening to the Rose Code about Bletchley Park, the code breakers at Bletchley Park.
Oh, all right.
Ava, you've read some of her books, haven't you? You've read The Nightingale?
That's Kristen.
Oh, that's not her.
Which is really funny that
the
you
Alice
mentioned that.
Network. The Alice Network?
Yeah.
That was the first one I read.
Elizabeth, it's funny you mentioned Nightingale because I'm reading Winter Garden right now, which is really interesting. I picked this book up and it's the same time frame of the Soviet Union and the Germans invading, which is
it Kristen Hanna?
Yes, it's so good.
I just have to say, I want you guys to know, I tried to get Kristen Hanna to do an interview with me in the first year she has a book about a female helicopter pilot who was in the Guard, the Air National Guard. And I thought it would be really interesting who has like family problems at home. And she wouldn't give me the time of day.
Uh-oh, should we stop reading her books then?
I was like, I'm gonna remember this. but like I was so excited because she has the rest of her work, like The Nightingale and everything. Fabulous stories.
If you guys get Winter Garden is in its same time frame, it's really good. Just FYI. It's a page. And that's Kristen Hanna. She did The Nightingale. If you haven't read that one too, that's a really good book.
I haven't even heard of her.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she's a really good author. Although now we might not want to because she's subbed Liz.
I heard The Nightingale might be made into a movie. I thought that I think actually during the pandemic or maybe right before the pandemic, I think it was made into a movie or a series or something.
Oh,
anyways,
all right.
Yeah, it was a really good book. I really enjoyed that. And Winter Garden too.
Yep. Okay, so there is a Russian TV series, probably can't watch it right now. There is a Russian TV series called Night Swallows.
Oh yeah, I saw that one. I wasn't sure if I was brave enough to watch that. Have you watched it, Elizabeth?
I watched some of it. I haven't watched the whole thing.
How is it?
It was fun. It was fun. And what was kind of cool about it is the beginning of it, the opening credits have got footage of the actual night witches just
great. That's cool.
wandering around their airfield and chatting to each other and taking off. And
I have to say, Elizabeth, I have to say I am very jealous of a lot of the photos in your book.
God, aren't the photos
the
amazing?
picture of Marina Raskova and her daughter Tanya is amazing. I have a picture. I've come across one of Tanya when she was older, but never with like the two of them together. And I was like, oh, I love that photo. It's so great.
That's a Alamy picture that I had. The publisher had built in a really stupendous budget for photographs, and they also got a researcher who was on the ground in Moscow to do to find some of the pictures.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so I was just like, they just kept sending me stuff, and I was like, oh my god, these are amazing. That was actually one of the funnest things was choosing like which ones, because I wanted to get like, you know, one of each regiment in action, and I tried to get one of each.
You want as many photos as
commanders.
possible, but then the publishing company is like, no, it costs money. You're like, no, but
that's
the photos
right.
are so great. We want
That's
as many
right.
photos
That's
as possible.
So you have more photos that kind of didn't make it into the book?
Yeah, I do. I mean, obviously I don't have any kind of rights to them, but they did send me. So the researcher, whoever this researcher was, they just called them the researcher. they would send like photographs, just snapshots that they'd taken of these pictures in some archive somewhere. So yeah, I do. I mean, I do have a lot more, but I mean, also there are a lot of pictures out there on the internet, you know, and although like you can't just rip them off, you know, screenshot them or whatever, they are there to look at. So the ones of Marina and Tanya are all there on one of the big archives, you know, and there are quite a few out there. If you want to go find pictures of these women, you know, do a Google image search for night witches, and you'll come up with loads. There's somebody, you may remember the name of the woman who did, I think it's a woman who did it, but somebody colorized a ton of pictures of these people in action, and they're really amazing.
Oh, it is.
So yeah,
it looks Google. It's so personal, isn't it? It just looks like
it really like brings them to life.
They seem so like real life. I mean, they were obviously real life, but yeah.
But we think of the past in black and white. You know, the distant past is always in black and white.
Right.
And to see these people in vivid color, even though it's, you know, been added afterwards, just really, really makes them seem, you know, like normal people.
When you mentioned the colorized photos, it reminded me of, and I don't know how or where they got the rights to use them, but I don't know, you can't probably see it, but there is a podcast dramatization. It's two ladies basically talking about the women, and I don't love everything about it, but it makes it kind of fun, and it's called the Night Witches Podcast. So for those of you who might be interested in hearing, you know, a couple of ladies talking about these women and their contributions, and if you go on Instagram and you look at their page, they have the beautiful colorized photos on Instagram. The Night Witches Podcast is their handle. So
I wanted to say there was one thing in your book which completely, it just kind of hit me as it's just like a life thought that you put in there, and that idea of how the wind affects one's life. And you said things about sometimes you need a tailwind to, you know, accelerate you, and then sometimes you need a headwind so you can take off. And I just went, that's like obstacles that come in your way. That's like a headwind, and you need that to get. So thank you. That was a complete,
gosh,
you know, one of those moments where you kind of go, oh my gosh, yes,
yeah, that's wonderful.
So
my pleasure. The sort of the end note of the book where it says go out and change the wind, that actually came to me kind of in an epiphany. This is sort of, you know, pay it forward. We had gone to see a play, which is actually a musical written by Sting called The Last Ship, if you know it at all. And they did it in Newcastle, and then they did it again in Glasgow. And we went to see it both places because my daughter's a big fan. And there was it was right after the Parkland school shooting. And they incorporated into the script something to the effect of, it's in your power to change things. Now we are handing this over to you, the audience. It was like involving the audience because they just had this little mini revolution and had done something to change their lives. And they're like, now it's your turn. Now you have to go and change something. And I was like, that's how I have to end this book. That's exactly the way to end it. Now you go do something too. So.
And it's really important for younger readers to know that they can make an impact not only on their own lives but on the world. There's really, really, so I think the fact that you included that side of it is just fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Can I just say I loved the little note in the back, the little shout out to Amber Lowe, who is also a Vermont College of Fine Arts grad, who traveled with you to Russia to write her own book, which I absolutely love also. I can't remember the title right now.
Which incidentally, the title that it gives in the notes in the back, that's not its title because
I know, so I was thrown off by that.
It's called Open Fire.
That's right. So Amber Lowe wrote the book Open Fire, which is about sort of the ground story in World War. Is it One? I thought it was in World War One. That's right. Yeah. So.
And it's mentioned the woman that she writes about, Maria Botchkareva, I think her name is. She led a regiment of women soldiers in the trenches in World War One. And that's what Amber's book is about.
Yeah, so Amber is a fellow Vermont College of Fine Arts graduate, and that book is a young adult novel, and it's extremely well researched and well done, and they did that research together. So I think that's
we did.
pretty cool. Amy, thank you so much also for joining us today.
Thank you for asking. This has been wonderful. It's a nice
good. Yeah, I hope so. And it's always fun to see you. Hopefully I'll get to see you in person next time. But
absolutely.
Yeah, it's been good. This was so great. Jonna, thank you as always. And Aaron for hosting the LA 99s. And then to those of you who joined us today, I hope that we get to see you on future calls. We try to pick a diverse selection of books in terms of genre, in terms of period of history and types of flying experience. And so, there should be a book out there for everyone if they like to read. And so thank you so much for joining us, those who just came today, because Elizabeth's star quality drew you to us. Thank you.
See you all in a month.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.